The millionaire lived a life of complete control, but a disconcerting silence from his fiancée sparked a strange feeling. He decided to follow her after work, trying to understand what was going on. The woman entered a modest house and was greeted by children. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Maxwell Harrington could never pinpoint the exact moment when doubt began to cloud his mind. Perhaps it was during the charity gala at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts when he caught a glimpse of his fiancée, Eliza Bennett, staring vacantly into her champagne glass as investors praised his latest acquisition. Or maybe it was in the moments when her smile seemed practiced, her laughter a bit too measured, a performance he couldn't quite understand. As CEO of Harrington Medical Innovations, Maxwell had spent his entire adult life calculating risks, predicting outcomes and controlling variables. Every decision in his boardroom was meticulously analyzed, every investment scrutinized with precision. But despite his command over $1 billion medical equipment empire, Eliza remained an enigma he couldn't decode. "You're staring again," remarked Thomas, Maxwell's younger brother and chief quality officer, sliding into the leather chair across from Maxwell's desk. The Boston skyline stretched behind them, a testament to the Harrington family's ascent from middle-class obscurity to New England royalty in just 2 generations. "She cancelled dinner again," Maxwell responded, his fingers drumming against the mahogany. "3rd time this month. Says she's working late at the library." Thomas chuckled, loosening his tie. Maybe she's finally realized that marrying into this family means signing up for a lifetime of cancelled dinners and board meetings disguised as vacations. But Maxwell couldn't laugh. There was something about Eliza's precision, the way she maintained their relationship within carefully drawn boundaries, that both captivated and unsettled him. They had been engaged for 8 months, yet he felt no closer to understanding the woman who had accepted his grandmother's emerald ring. "I've always appreciated her independence," Maxwell mused, more to himself than to Thomas. "But lately it feels like there's something more. Something she's deliberately keeping separate from us, from me." Thomas leaned forward, his expression sobering. "Max, you're overthinking this. Eliza's different from the women you've dated before. She's not impressed by the Harrington name or the penthouse view. That's why you love her, remember?" Maxwell nodded absently. It was true. As a rare books conservator at the Boston Public Library, Eliza seemed almost indifferent to wealth. Their meeting had been refreshingly uncalculated, a chance encounter when Maxwell donated his grandfather's medical journals to the library's historical collection. Her quiet passion for preserving history, her integrity, and her genuine disinterest in his status had drawn him in like a gravitational force. But now, sitting in his corner office as rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows, Maxwell couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. "I'm heading to the conference call with the London team," Thomas said, rising. "The new cardiac monitoring system launch can't wait, especially with those Japanese investors circling." He paused at the door. "And Max, give Eliza some space. Not everyone wants their life dissected like a quarterly report." After Thomas left, Maxwell swiveled his chair toward the window, watching the grey clouds gather over Boston Harbor. The forecast had predicted torrential rain, the kind that typically kept Eliza at the library even later than usual, meticulously protecting fragile manuscripts from humidity damage. The decision came suddenly, without rational deliberation. Maxwell cancelled his afternoon meetings, ignored 3 calls from his assistant, and found himself in his Audi, parked across from the imposing neoclassical facade of the Boston Public Library. At 5:30 p.m., Eliza emerged, her chestnut hair tucked beneath a navy blue umbrella. Maxwell sank lower in his seat, a wave of shame washing over him. What was he doing? Spying on his fiancée like a jealous teenager? But before he could reconsider, Eliza walked past the subway entrance she normally took toward their Beacon Hill apartment. Instead, she headed in the opposite direction toward the South End. Maxwell followed at a safe distance, his windshield wipers struggling against the downpour. 20 minutes later, Eliza turned onto a quiet street lined with modest brownstones. a world away from the gleaming luxury of their own neighborhood. She stopped at a small, well-maintained house with window boxes overflowing with rain-drenched wildflowers. Maxwell parked and watched, heart racing, as Eliza approached the door. It swung open before she could knock, and two young girls, perhaps 7 and 9 years old, launched themselves at her with unbridled enthusiasm. Eliza's face transformed with a joy Maxwell had never witnessed before. She embraced the children with familiar affection, then disappeared inside. Confused and unsettled, Maxwell remained in his car as twilight descended. Through the illuminated windows he could see glimpses of a cozy interior, walls adorned with children's artwork, mismatched furniture that spoke of comfort rather than design, and Eliza moving through the space with the ease of someone completely at home. Maxwell was about to drive away when an elderly woman emerged from the neighboring house, struggling with groceries. On impulse, he stepped out into the rain to help her. "Thank you, dear," she said, squinting up at him. "Not many gentlemen left these days." "Do you know the family that lives there?" Maxwell asked, gesturing toward the house where Eliza had disappeared, his voice casual despite the thundering of his heart. "The Bennetts, of course. Such a tragedy. What happened to Sarah? Heart of gold, that one. Worked double shifts as a nurse to keep those girls in good schools after their parents passed. Then that fancy hospital kills her with their negligence, and poor Eliza's left picking up the pieces." Maxwell felt the ground shift beneath him. "Sarah was Eliza's sister?" "Twin sister," the woman corrected, shaking her head. "Identical in looks, but different as night and day in temperament. Sarah was all sunshine and laughter. Eliza's always been the serious one, even before. Well, before the tragedy." She peered at him more closely. "You're not from around here, are you?" Maxwell mumbled something about being new to the neighborhood and retreated to his car, his mind racing. Twin sister, tragedy, hospital negligence. The pieces didn't fit with anything Eliza had ever shared about herself. She had mentioned growing up in western Massachusetts, had spoken of her parents retiring to Florida, but never once had she mentioned a sister, let alone an identical twin who had apparently died, leaving behind 2 young daughters. As he sat in stunned silence, his phone lit up with a text from Eliza. "Working late, don't wait up." The casual deception, so at odds with her usual directness, felt like a physical blow. His fingers hovered over the screen, tempted to confront her immediately. But something stopped him, perhaps the memory of the joy on her face as she embraced those children, or the weight of the secret she had carefully maintained throughout their relationship. Instead, Maxwell drove to his office, where he would spend the next several hours searching databases, pulling medical records and reviewing contracts, actions that would ultimately unravel not just the mystery of Eliza's hidden life, but the carefully constructed foundation of his own. Because somewhere in the Harrington Medical Innovations files lay the truth about Sarah Bennett's death, and that truth, Maxwell was beginning to suspect, was inextricably linked to the company that bore his name, and the brother who had just warned him against looking too deeply into matters best left alone. The Harrington Medical Innovations headquarters stood empty at midnight, save for the security guard who nodded respectfully as Maxwell strode through the lobby. The access panel to the executive floor recognized his fingerprint with a soft beep, granting him entry to the silent corridors where billion-dollar decisions were made daily. Maxwell bypassed his own office and headed straight for the records department. As CEO, he had unrestricted access to every file, every contract, every incident report, yet he rarely exercised this power, trusting his executive team to handle departmental matters. Tonight was different. Tonight, he needed answers. "Sarah Bennett," he murmured, typing the name into the database. Several results appeared, most related to employee health insurance claims and standard patient data from partnered hospitals. But one file, marked confidential and dated 18 months prior, caught his attention. Incident report, Boston Memorial Hospital, equipment malfunction, S. Bennett. Maxwell's fingers trembled slightly as he clicked open the document. The clinical language did nothing to soften the horror of what he read. Sarah Bennett, 34, experienced catastrophic organ failure following routine surgery when a Harrington-manufactured heart monitor failed to detect critical changes in her condition. Internal investigation pending. Status: classified by legal department. Classified by legal department, Maxwell repeated aloud, the words echoing in the empty room. What had happened to that investigation? Why had it never crossed his desk? He dug deeper, accessing Thomas's departmental files. There it was, a comprehensive report from their quality assurance team, identifying a critical software flaw in the H8500 cardiac monitoring system. The report was dated 3 months before Sarah's incident, with a clear recommendation: recall all units immediately. But attached to the report was a memo from Thomas to the board. Implementing a full recall would create an estimated $70 million loss and potentially irreparable damage to investor confidence ahead of our IPO. Recommend addressing issues in next generation while implementing minor software updates to existing units. Maxwell felt physically ill. The board, himself included, had approved Thomas's recommendation without requesting detailed information about the minor issues being addressed. Standard procedure for a company managing hundreds of products and thousands of technical decisions annually. Except this particular decision had resulted in Sarah Bennett's death. His phone buzzed with a text from Eliza. "Hope your meetings went well. Miss you." The simple message, laden with unspoken secrets on both sides now, felt like another betrayal. Dawn was breaking over Boston Harbor when Maxwell finally left the office, armed with documents and a growing sense of complicity in a tragedy that had altered lives, including his own, in ways he was only beginning to understand. For the next 2 weeks, Maxwell maintained a careful facade of normalcy. He attended board meetings, reviewed quarterly projections, and smiled appropriately when Eliza showed him wedding venue options. But his mind was elsewhere, constructing a timeline of deception and negligence that implicated his company, his brother, and by extension himself. Meanwhile, he began making anonymous arrangements, college scholarship funds established for Sophie and Emma Bennett, donations to their elementary school's science program, and discreet deliveries of art supplies and books that mysteriously appeared on their doorstep. It wasn't atonement. Nothing could atone for what had happened, but it was something. On a crisp fall morning, Maxwell found himself once again parked near the Bennett home, watching as Eliza helped the girls into their school uniforms, braided their hair, and walked them to the corner bus stop. The domesticity of the scene, so at odds with the polished, reserved woman he thought he knew, created a hollow ache in his chest. "Mr. Harrington?" Maxwell startled at the voice beside his car window. A middle-aged woman with shrewd eyes regarded him with undisguised suspicion. "Mrs. Martinez," she introduced herself, folding her arms. "I've noticed you watching the house several times now. I'm a protective neighbor, and those girls have been through enough." "I'm not," Maxwell began, then stopped. What could he say? That he wasn't stalking his own fiancée? That he was just trying to understand the woman he loved before confronting her with his knowledge of her hidden life? Martinez's expression softened slightly. "You're Eliza's fellow, aren't you? I recognized you from a photo she keeps inside." Maxwell nodded, surprised. "She has a photo of us? On the girl's dresser. Says it's important they know who's in her life, even if..." Well, Mrs. Martinez's mouth tightened. "Look, I don't know what's going on between you two, but those children don't need any more disruption. Sarah's passing nearly destroyed them. Eliza's the only stable thing they have left." Maxwell swallowed hard. "I would never do anything to hurt them, or Eliza." "Then maybe you should be talking to her instead of sitting in your fancy car watching from a distance." Mrs. Martinez's voice held no judgment, only a weary wisdom. Secrets have a way of poisoning everything they touch. As she walked away, Maxwell made a decision. Tonight he would confront the truth, all of it. But first there was one more person he needed to speak with. The South Boston coffee shop was far from Maxwell's usual haunts. At a corner table, Catherine Lynn fidgeted with her paper cup, eyes darting nervously toward the door. "Thank you for meeting me," Maxwell said, sliding into the chair across from her. "When the CEO of Harrington Medical personally requests a meeting, saying no isn't really an option," Catherine replied tersely. though I'm surprised you even know I exist, given how thoroughly your company erased me." Maxwell winced. Catherine Lynn had been a rising star in their quality assurance department before her abrupt termination 18 months ago, right after Sarah Bennett's death. "I know you tried to warn us about the H8500 cardiac monitors," Maxwell said quietly, "and I know my brother had you fired for it." Catherine's eyes widened slightly. "So you finally figured it out. What changed? Did your conscience suddenly kick in when the liability insurance payments cleared?" Her bitterness was justified, but Maxwell had no time for recrimination. "I need to know exactly what happened, Ms. Lynn. The internal reports are sanitized and He hesitated. "I need the truth." Catherine studied him for a long moment before reaching into her bag. She slid a flash drive across the table. "I kept copies of everything. The original simulations showing the software flaw, the probability analyses indicating patient risk, the six formal warnings I submitted before Sarah Bennett's surgery, and the emails from your brother threatening legal action if I went public." Maxwell stared at the small device. "Why are you giving this to me now?" "Because Sarah Bennett deserves justice," Catherine said simply, "and because her sister deserves to know why she died." Maxwell's head snapped up. "You know about Eliza?" A sad smile crossed Catherine's face. Sarah talked about her constantly during her treatment sessions, the brilliant twin sister who preserved ancient texts while she patched up broken bodies, the aunt who spoiled her daughters with handmade constellation maps and stories about women who changed history. Catherine leaned forward. "Sarah was my patient, Mr. Harrington, not just a statistic in your company's risk assessment." Maxwell closed his eyes briefly, imagining Sarah Bennett, a woman with Eliza's face but apparently a vastly different spirit, laughing and telling stories to her daughters. A woman who had trusted the equipment bearing his family name to keep her safe. "One more thing," Catherine added, her voice dropping. 2 days after Sarah's death, someone from your company accessed her personal medical records, records that had nothing to do with her surgery or the equipment failure. When I questioned it, that's when the termination paperwork appeared." Maxwell frowned. "Who accessed the records?" "The system showed Thomas Harrington's credentials, but the timing was strange. 3 a.m. on a Sunday. Not exactly your brother's style." A chill ran down Maxwell's spine. Thomas had always been ambitious, occasionally ruthless in business matters, but this level of callousness seemed inconceivable. "Why are you telling me all this?" Maxwell asked finally. Catherine stood, gathering her coat. "Because everyone deserves a chance to choose who they want to be, Mr. Harrington, even you." She paused at the door. "What you do with that information will show whether you're more than just your family name." As she disappeared into the Boston afternoon, Maxwell remained seated, the flash drive heavy in his palm. Tonight, he would face Eliza with the truth, but first he needed to understand just how deep his brother's deception went, and whether Thomas's protective instincts toward the company had transformed into something far more sinister. Back at Harrington headquarters, Maxwell bypassed the security protocols on Thomas's private server. What he found shook him to his core. Detailed surveillance reports on Eliza, dating back to the weeks following Sarah's death, financial analyses of the Bennett family's potential litigation threat, and, most disturbing of all, a comprehensive strategy for handling the Bennett situation should it ever become public. The document outlined plans to discredit Sarah's medical history, suggesting pre-existing conditions that might have contributed to the equipment's failure to detect her distress. It proposed leveraging Harrington's considerable influence with local media to position any allegation as an unfortunate but unavoidable tragedy, rather than corporate negligence. But it was the final paragraph that turned Maxwell's blood to ice. Initial background checks on surviving sister, E. Bennett, reveal potential vulnerability. Unmarried academic with no experience in childcare, suddenly responsible for minor dependents. Should situation escalate, consider subtly encouraging family services evaluation of custody arrangement. The implications were clear. If Eliza ever threatened the company's interests, Thomas was prepared to challenge her custody of Sophie and Emma, to use the tragedy of losing their mother as a weapon against their aunt. Maxwell closed the file, a cold fury building inside him. This was beyond corporate self-protection. This was calculated cruelty. And he had been complicit through his ignorance, his willingness to focus on expansion and innovation while leaving operational details to others. As he drove toward the penthouse he shared with Eliza, Maxwell knew that tonight would change everything. He would tell her the truth about Sarah, about the company's negligence, about Thomas's plans. He would face her anger and heartbreak, accept whatever judgment she rendered. What he didn't know was that Eliza had made a discovery of her own that afternoon, a discovery that would make his carefully planned confession infinitely more complicated and devastating for them both. The Beacon Hill penthouse was silent. When Maxwell arrived home, the city lights of Boston twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows. Usually he found comfort in the meticulously designed space, with its clean lines and carefully curated art. Tonight, it felt hollow, a showcase rather than a home. "Eliza," he called, setting down his briefcase filled with damning evidence against his own company. He found her in the study, sitting motionless in the leather armchair that faced the door, as if she'd been waiting for him. On the mahogany desk beside her lay a silver bracelet, a delicate chain bearing a small pendant engraved with the Harrington Medical Innovations logo. "I was organizing Sarah's things today," Eliza said, her voice unnervingly calm. "The girls are finally ready to go through some of her personal items, create memory boxes." She picked up the bracelet, letting it dangle from her fingers. This was in her jewelry box. A gift from the hospital where she worked, apparently. From your company. Maxwell stood frozen in the doorway, all his prepared confessions suddenly inadequate. "I didn't think much of it at first," Eliza continued, her eyes never leaving his face. "Sarah worked with many medical equipment companies, but something about it bothered me, so I did some research this afternoon." She reached for a folder beside her and withdrew several printed documents. Harrington Medical supplied all the monitoring equipment for Boston Memorial's cardiac wing 3 years ago, the same equipment that failed to alert staff when Sarah's heart began to struggle after what should have been routine surgery. For 18 months, Eliza had maintained perfect composure around him, poised, thoughtful, present, but somehow distant. Now that composure was fracturing before his eyes, revealing glimpses of raw pain beneath. "Were you ever going to tell me?" she asked quietly. "Or was keeping me in the dark part of your damage control strategy?" "Eliza, I only discovered the connection recently," Maxwell began, moving toward her. She held up a hand, stopping him. Please don't lie to me now." "I'm not lying. I swear to you I didn't know about Sarah until 2 weeks ago when I followed you to the South End." The confession tumbled out awkwardly. Eliza blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "You followed me?" "I sensed you were keeping something from me. I never imagined—" Maxwell ran a hand through his hair. "I've spent the last 2 weeks investigating what happened. I came home tonight to tell you everything." He opened his briefcase and spread documents across the desk. Internal reports, Catherine Lynn's flash drive, copies of Thomas's surveillance files. Eliza's eyes widened as she scanned the materials. "Your company knew," she whispered. "The monitors were defective, and they knew." "Yes," Maxwell admitted, the single word carrying the weight of complicity. "A software flaw that should have triggered an immediate recall. But you didn't recall them." "No, Thomas," Maxwell stopped himself. "No, I can't blame this solely on Thomas. The decision went through proper channels. I signed off on it, not fully understanding what I was approving. That's no excuse." Eliza stood abruptly, moving away from him to stand by the window. Her silhouette against the night skyline looked small and painfully vulnerable. "Do you know what it was like?" she asked softly. "Getting that call in the middle of the night? Rushing to the hospital only to find my sister, my twin, already gone? Having to tell Emma and Sophie that their mother wasn't coming home?" Maxwell remained silent, knowing no response could possibly be adequate. Sarah raised those girls alone after her husband's car accident when they were toddlers. She worked double shifts, went back to school for her advanced nursing certification, built a life for them brick by brick. Eliza's voice cracked. All while I pursued my academic career, dropping in for holidays and birthdays with books and telescopes, playing the fun aunt with none of the responsibility. She turned to face him, tears streaming freely now. And then she was gone, just gone. And suddenly those little girls were looking to me, steady, reliable Aunt Eliza, who preserves fragile things for a living but has no idea how to preserve a family. Maxwell took a tentative step toward her. You've done an amazing job with them. They're thriving despite everything. Don't, Eliza's voice hardened. Don't pretend you know anything about them, or me, or what we've been through. You're right, I don't, Maxwell acknowledged, because you never told me about them, about Sarah, about any of it. And now I know why, Eliza replied, gesturing to the surveillance reports. Your brother has been monitoring me since Sarah's death, planning contingencies in case I became a problem. Thomas acted without my knowledge, Maxwell said firmly. His actions do not represent me or my values. Eliza laughed bitterly. Your values? You run a company that buried evidence, of faulty equipment to protect profits, equipment that took my sister from her daughters. Yes, Maxwell admitted, refusing to flinch from the truth. And I have to live with that knowledge for the rest of my life. Eliza crossed her arms, studying him with newfound perception. The anonymous donations to the girls' school, the art supplies that mysteriously appeared, the college funds established in their names, that was you, wasn't it? Maxwell nodded, ashamed now of what had seemed like generosity, but revealed itself as guilt-driven atonement. I don't want your money, Eliza said coldly. And neither do the girls. We want accountability. We want justice for Sarah. She slipped his grandmother's emerald ring from her finger and placed it carefully on the desk. The finality of the gesture hit Maxwell like a physical blow. Eliza, please. Let me make this right. Make it right, she echoed incredulously. My sister is gone. Her daughters will grow up without their mother. How exactly do you propose to make that right? Before Maxwell could respond, his phone buzzed insistently. Thomas's name flashed on the screen. After the fourth call in succession, Maxwell reluctantly answered. This isn't a good time, Thomas. Turn on the news, Thomas demanded without preamble. Channel 7, now. Maxwell reached for the remote, clicking on the wall-mounted television. A somber news anchor appeared beside a photo of Boston Memorial, hospital and a smaller inset picture of Sarah Bennett in her nursing scrubs, a face identical to Eliza's, but somehow radiating a different energy even through the photograph. Breaking tonight, allegations of corporate negligence and cover-up at one of Boston's most prestigious medical companies. Investigative reporter Daniel Rodriguez has obtained documents suggesting Harrington Medical Innovations knowingly supplied defective equipment to area hospitals, resulting in at least one confirmed patient death 18 months ago. We go live to Rodriguez outside Harrington headquarters. The camera cut to a serious-looking reporter standing in front of the gleaming glass facade of the Harrington building. Sources close to the investigation have provided extensive documentation showing that Harrington executives, including Chief Quality Officer Thomas Harrington, were aware of potentially fatal flaws in their cardiac monitoring systems months before the death of Sarah Bennett, a nurse at Boston Memorial, and herself, the mother of 2 young children. Maxwell felt Eliza stiffen beside him as footage appeared showing Catherine Lynn entering the offices of the Boston Globe, presumably with her evidence in hand. Thomas's voice hissed through the phone. This is a coordinated attack. Lynn went to the press with stolen proprietary information. Legal is already preparing a counteroffensive. We need to issue a statement immediately denying these unsubstantiated claims. Maxwell watched Eliza's face, the grief and rage warring in her expression as her sister's life and death became headline, news a corporate scandal rather than a personal tragedy. No, Maxwell said firmly. What do you mean, no? Thomas demanded. No denials, no counter-narratives, no legal intimidation. Maxwell's decision crystallized as he spoke. We're going to acknowledge what happened, apologize publicly, and make full restitution. Not just to the Bennett family, but to everyone affected by our negligence. "Are you insane?" Thomas nearly shouted. "That's corporate suicide. The board will never—" "I don't care what the board thinks," Maxwell interrupted. "This is about doing what's right. Finally." He ended the call and turned to Eliza, who was staring at him with an unreadable expression. "I know this doesn't fix anything," he said quietly, "but it's a start." "Why now?" she asked. "Because you got caught? Because it's your reputation at stake?" "Because I love you," Maxwell replied simply. "And because I can't build a life with you on a foundation of lies and cover-ups, even if that means losing everything, the company, my family's legacy." "You?" Eliza shook her head slowly. "You still don't understand. This isn't about us, Maxwell. It's about Sarah. It's about Emma and Sophie growing up knowing their mother's life mattered." "Then help me understand," Maxwell pleaded. "Come with me to the press conference tomorrow. Tell Sarah's story, not as a statistic or a legal case, but as the incredible woman and mother you've described. Let me use whatever influence I have left to make sure this never happens to another family." Eliza hesitated, conflict evident in her eyes. Finally, she reached for her purse and coat. "Where are you going?" Maxwell asked, heart sinking. "Home," she replied firmly, "to the girls. They need me tonight, more than ever." "And us?" Eliza paused at the door. "There is no us right now, Maxwell. There's just the truth finally coming to light. What happens after that depends on what you do with it." As the door closed behind her, Maxwell turned back to the television, where the scandal continued to unfold in breaking news alerts and expert commentaries. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from board members, legal counsel, and crisis management teams. He silenced the phone and began preparing for what would likely be the most consequential press conference of his life, one that would fundamentally reshape not just Harrington Medical Innovations, but his understanding of responsibility, atonement, and the true cost of integrity. What Maxwell couldn't know was that across town, Thomas was making plans of his own, plans that would test the limits of brotherly loyalty and corporate ethics in ways neither of them could imagine. And in the middle, Eliza and her nieces would face challenges that threatened the fragile new life they had built from the ruins of tragedy. The lights of the press room were blinding as Maxwell stepped up to the podium, the Harrington Medical Innovations logo gleaming behind him. Camera shutters clicked in rapid succession. Reporters leaned forward, digital recorders extended. In the front row sat the hastily assembled board of directors, their expressions ranging from barely contained fury to shocked disbelief. Maxwell adjusted the microphone and looked directly into the cameras. 18 months ago, Sarah Bennett, a dedicated nurse and mother of 2 young daughters, passed away at Boston Memorial Hospital following what should have been routine surgery. His voice was steady, unscripted. The official report cited equipment malfunction as a contributing factor. What that report didn't state, what we as a company failed to disclose, was that Harrington Medical Innovations knew about potential flaws in that equipment months before it failed. A murmur rippled through the assembled press corps. From the corner of his eye, Maxwell could see Thomas standing with the legal team, frantically signaling for him to stop. "As CEO of Harrington Medical, I bear ultimate responsibility for this. Failure, not just of our equipment, but of our moral obligation to the patients who trust their lives to our technology. Today, I am announcing my resignation, effective immediately." The murmur became a roar of questions. Maxwell raised a hand for silence. "Additionally, I am personally committing half of my ownership stake in the company to establish the Sarah Bennett Foundation for Patient Safety, which will fund independent oversight of medical equipment standards and provide support for families affected by medical negligence." In the back of the room, a door opened. Maxwell's heart stopped when he saw Eliza slip quietly inside, arms crossed protectively over her chest, her face a careful mask. "This is not about corporate damage control," Maxwell continued, finding his voice again. "This is about acknowledging that behind every statistical risk assessment, behind every bottom-line calculation, there are real people whose lives hang in the balance. Sarah Bennett was not just a case number. She was a sister, A nurse who dedicated her life to healing others, and most importantly, a mother whose daughters will grow up without her. Thomas pushed forward through the crowd, reaching for the microphone. What my brother means to say is that while we deeply regret any suffering experienced by the Bennett family, we cannot comment further on ongoing litigation matters. Harrington, Medical Innovations remains committed to the highest standards of... No. Maxwell physically moved his brother away from the podium. No more corporate doublespeak, no more evasions. He turned back to the press. The documentation being distributed to you now includes internal communications, confirming that our quality assurance team identified the software flaw, recommended a full recall, and was overruled by senior management, including my brother, Thomas Harrington. Camera flashes exploded as assistants handed out press packets containing redacted versions of Catherine Lynn's evidence. Thomas's face contorted with rage. "You're destroying everything our family built," he hissed. "No," Maxwell replied quietly. "I'm trying to save what matters most." As security escorted a protesting Thomas from the room, Maxwell concluded his statement. "I will be cooperating fully with the independent investigation and encourage all Harrington employees to do the same. The Bennett family, and all the families who trust our equipment with their lives, deserve nothing less than complete transparency and accountability." The press conference dissolved into chaos as reporters shouted questions and board members huddled in urgent consultation. Through the crowd, Maxwell saw Eliza slip out as quietly as she had arrived. He wanted desperately to follow her, but he had made a commitment to transparency. For the next 2 hours, he answered every question honestly, accepting responsibility without reservation or qualification. By the time he finally left Harrington headquarters, possibly for the last time, the sky had darkened, and a gentle snow had begun to fall across Boston. His phone contained 67 missed calls and over 100 text messages, but the only person he wanted to speak with hadn't reached out at all. On impulse, Maxwell drove to the South End, parking a respectful distance from the Bennett home. The modest brownstone glowed with warm light, snow gathering on the window boxes where dormant wildflowers waited for spring. Through the window, he could see Eliza seated at a small table with Emma and Sophie, their heads bent over what appeared to be a craft project. He was about to drive away when the front door opened, and Eliza stepped onto the porch, wrapping a cardigan tightly around herself. "Mrs. Martinez texted me that you were out here," she explained, her breath visible in the cold air. "Again." Maxwell managed a rueful smile. "She's very protective of you all." "We all need people like that in our lives," Eliza said, crossing her arms against the cold. "I saw your press conference." "I meant every word." Eliza nodded slowly. "I believe you did." She glanced back toward the house. "The girls are working on their memory boxes for Sarah. Tonight seemed like a good night for it." An awkward silence settled between them, filled with unspoken questions and unresolved pain. In the ambient light from the street lamps, snowflakes danced around Eliza's dark hair, momentarily transforming her into something ethereal and untouchable. "I resigned from the library today," she said finally. "With the story breaking, reporters started showing up. I didn't want to bring that chaos into my workplace." "I'm sorry," Maxwell offered inadequately, "for all of this." "You didn't create the situation, Maxwell. You just finally exposed it." She paused, studying his face. "Why did you come here tonight?" Before he could answer, the front door cracked open and a small face peered out. Sophie, the younger of the two girls, with Sarah's eyes and Eliza's serious expression. "Aunt Eliza, Emma's looking for the star stickers for the memory box." Sophie's curious gaze shifted to Maxwell. For an unsettling moment, he saw recognition in the child's eyes, though they had never formally met. "You're the man from Aunt Eliza's picture," she stated with the direct certainty unique to children. "The one who sends us books but never comes inside." Maxwell felt heat rise in his face as Eliza shot him a questioning look. "Sophie, this is Mr. Harrington," Eliza said carefully. "He's a friend." "Is he coming in?" Sophie asked, her face brightening with childlike hope for novelty. "Emma's making hot chocolate. She puts extra marshmallows in mine when she thinks you're not looking." Eliza hesitated, clearly torn. Maxwell prepared himself for a polite refusal, an entirely reasonable boundary given everything that had transpired. "It's okay," he said quietly. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right with everything happening in the news." "I should go?" He turned toward his car, snow crunching beneath his shoes, when Eliza's voice stopped him. "It's cold out here," she said simply. "And Sophie's right. Emma makes excellent hot chocolate." The invitation was tentative, fragile as a soap bubble, but it was more than Maxwell had dared hope for. He followed Eliza into the warmth of the Bennett home, immediately struck by how different it felt from his sleek penthouse. Here, mismatched furniture gathered companionably around a well-worn rug. Bookshelves overflowed with volumes ranging from children's picture books to medical texts to Eliza's beloved rare manuscripts. Handmade paper stars hung from the ceiling. A solar system mobile dangled above a reading nook, and the walls held framed children's artwork alongside family photographs. Emma, the older niece at 9 years old, stood at the kitchen counter carefully stirring a pot. She looked up with startled eyes so like Sarah's, so like Eliza's, that Maxwell felt a jolt of recognition. "Girls, this is Mr. Harrington," Eliza introduced, her voice deliberately neutral. "He'll be joining us for hot chocolate." "Maxwell, please," he corrected gently. "Are you Aunt Eliza's boyfriend?" Emma asked bluntly, pouring steaming chocolate into mismatched mugs. "Emma!" Eliza admonished, color rising in her cheeks. "No," Maxwell answered honestly. "We're figuring things out." Sophie, who had been examining him with undisguised curiosity, nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Like when my stars fell off the ceiling and we had to figure out how to stick them back up again." A smile tugged at Maxwell's lips despite everything. "Something like that." The kitchen table was covered with craft supplies, colorful paper, photographs, scissors, and glue sticks. At the center sat 2 shoeboxes, one decorated with planets and stars, the other with butterflies and flowers. "We're making memory boxes," Sophie explained, as if Maxwell might not understand the obvious importance of the project, "for remembering Mom." Maxwell felt a lump form in his throat. "That's a beautiful idea." Emma, more reserved than her sister, studied him with eyes that seemed too old for her face. "Did you know our mum?" she asked. Maxwell glanced at Eliza, uncertain how to navigate this delicate territory. "Mr. Harrington didn't know your mother," Eliza answered carefully, "but his company made equipment for the hospital where she worked. The machine that broke," Emma said with the devastating directness of a child. Not a question, a statement of fact. Maxwell felt the air leave his lungs. He knelt down to Emma's eye level, knowing he owed this child nothing less than the truth. "Yes," he admitted quietly, "the machine that broke, and I'm very, very sorry about that." Emma regarded him solemnly, holding his gaze far longer than most adults could manage. Finally, she offered him a mug of hot chocolate. "Mom always said you should forgive people who say sorry and really mean it." Maxwell accepted the mug, his hand trembling slightly. "Your mom sounds like she was very wise." "She was," Sophie chimed in, returning to her memory box. "She knew all the constellations without even looking them up. She taught us the made-up ones too, the ones that aren't in books." Maxwell sat silently as the girls returned to their project, occasionally sharing stories about their mother, how she sang off-key while making pancakes, how she could find lost items by closing her eyes and spinning around, how she kept a jar of emergency glitter for particularly bad days. Through it all, Eliza remained quiet, sipping her hot chocolate and watching Maxwell's interactions with her nieces with cautious eyes. When the girls finally finished their memory boxes and reluctantly headed upstairs for bed, insisting that Eliza perform their usual bedtime ritual of constellation stories, Maxwell offered to clean up. He was washing the last of the hot chocolate mugs when Eliza returned, pausing in the kitchen doorway. "They like you," she said, sounding almost surprised. "They're extraordinary children," Maxwell replied honestly. "Sarah must have been remarkable." A ghost of a smile crossed Eliza's face. "She was. Louder than me, braver in some ways. She always jumped in while I stood back and analyzed." Her expression clouded. "When we were kids, people called us the voice and the echo. She was always the voice." And now you're their voice, Maxwell observed quietly. Eliza nodded, eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. It should be her here, helping with homework, making hot chocolate, teaching them about stars and books and life. She pressed her lips together, forcing composure. The press ambushed them after school today, called out questions about their mother, about the Harrington scandal. They're just children. Maxwell felt sick. I'm so sorry, Eliza. I never intended... Tino, she interrupted. Your press conference actually helped. You took responsibility clearly, didn't hide behind corporate language. She hesitated. Thomas won't do the same, will he? No, Maxwell admitted. He's already launched a counter-narrative suggesting Sarah had pre-existing conditions that contributed to her situation. Eliza's jaw tightened. Of course he has. Maxwell dried his hands and faced her directly. I've seen the surveillance. Reports, Eliza. I know what Thomas was prepared to do if you pursued legal action, the threats against your custody. Her eyes widened in shock. He would have tried to take the girls. He considered it a viable contingency. I've neutralized that threat, but you should be prepared. Thomas won't go down without a fight. Eliza sank into a kitchen chair, the full implications of what they were facing washing over her. The girls have already lost so much. Maxwell took a seat across from her, which is why we need to end this cleanly, definitively. No prolonged legal battles, no media circus. He leaned forward intently. I have a proposal, but I need you to hear me out completely before responding. I'm listening, Eliza said cautiously. I want to transform Boston Memorial's cardiac wing into the Sarah Bennett Center for Patient Care, with state-of-the-art equipment and protocols specifically designed to prevent what happened to Sarah. I've already secured commitments from 3 board members to back me. Eliza's expression remained guarded. More buildings with names on them won't bring Sarah back. No, he agreed. But alongside the center, I want to establish an anonymous oversight committee with real power, the authority to review and recall equipment, to override corporate interests when patient safety is at stake. Maxwell took a deep breath. And I want you to chair it. Eliza blinked in surprise. Me? I'm a book conservator, not a medical professional. Exactly. You understand the importance of preservation, of protecting vulnerable things, and you have more motivation than anyone to ensure no other family experiences what yours has. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand. This isn't about charity or guilt, Eliza. It's about transformation, using what happened to create real change. For a long moment, Eliza was silent, processing his proposal. Outside, the snow continued to fall, muffling the sounds of the city. And what about us? She finally asked, the question hanging between them. That's not part of the proposal, Maxwell said quietly. That's entirely separate, entirely your decision. I love you, Eliza. I want a future with you, but that can't be conditional on anything. Else? Eliza stood abruptly, moving to the window where she gazed out at the snowy street. When she turned back, her expression was resolute. I'll consider your proposal for the center and the committee, she said carefully. But I need time, Maxwell. Time to think, to focus on the girls, to process everything that's happened. Of course, he agreed immediately, standing to leave. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I'm going to make this right, with or without your involvement. Sarah deserves that, the girls deserve that. And what do you deserve, Maxwell? Eliza asked softly. The question caught him off guard. I'm not sure that matters anymore. It matters to me, she replied, her gaze steady on his face. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent text from his attorney. Thomas giving statement to press in 30 minutes, claims to have evidence you knew about defects before Bennett incident, claiming corporate sabotage. Maxwell showed Eliza the message, his expression grim. It seems my brother is escalating faster than anticipated. What will you do? Eliza asked. Face it head on, Maxwell replied, his resolve strengthening. No more secrets, no more evasions. Whatever Thomas thinks he has, the truth is on our side. As he stepped out into the snowy night, Eliza called after him. Maxwell, the girls' science fair is tomorrow evening at their school. 7 o'clock. If you wanted to see what they've been working on, it wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was an opening, a small constellation of possibility glimmering in the darkness of everything that had happened. And for tonight, that was enough. Maxwell nodded, hope tentatively unfurling in his chest. I'll be there. What neither of them could know was that Thomas's desperate countermeasures would create a chain reaction, threatening not just Maxwell's reputation and Eliza's custody of the girls, but the very foundation of trust they had begun so carefully to rebuild. The elementary school gymnasium buzzed with the excited energy of children showing off their science projects. Handmade volcanoes erupted with baking soda and vinegar, solar system models hung from display boards, and proud parents navigated the crowded aisles between folding tables. Maxwell arrived exactly at 7, a nervous tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the business empire now hanging in the balance. He had faced hostile boards, negotiated billion-dollar mergers, and weathered market crashes with less anxiety than he felt entering this school science fair. He spotted Eliza, across the room, helping Emma adjust something on her display board. In the harsh fluorescent lighting of the gymnasium, surrounded by children and parents in casual attire, Eliza looked different from the poised, reserved woman he'd known in Boston's rarefied social circles. Here, in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, she seemed more authentic and infinitely more approachable. As if sensing his presence, she looked up. After a moment's hesitation, she gestured him over. "You came," she said simply. "I said I would." Maxwell glanced at the display board where Emma was meticulously arranging a series of small potted plants. "What's the project?" Emma straightened, assuming the formal posture of a presenter. "It's called Healing Gardens, Medicinal Plants of North America." She gestured to the plants. "Mom used to tell us that modern medicine forgets that all the first medicines came from plants. These are all native species with proven medicinal properties, documented by both Native American healers and scientific research." Maxwell leaned, genuinely impressed by the detail and organization. "This is incredible work, Emma." "Aunt Eliza helped with the research," Emma acknowledged, "and Sophie drew the illustrations." As if on cue, Sophie bounded up, chocolate smeared on one cheek. "Mr. Maxwell, you have to come see my project too. It's about stars." "Sophie," Eliza corrected gently, "it's Maxwell, not Mr. Maxwell." Actually, Maxwell found himself saying, "Mr. Maxwell is fine." The formality felt appropriate somehow, a recognition of the tentative nature of his position in their lives. Sophie grabbed his hand without hesitation, tugging him toward her table on the other side of the gymnasium. Her project, Constellations, Ancient Stories Written in Stars, featured a black poster board dotted with silver stars, forming traditional constellations, alongside what appeared to be entirely original ones. "These are the ones everyone knows," Sophie explained, pointing to representations of Orion, Ursa Major, and other classic configurations. "But these," she continued, indicating her original creations, "are the special ones Mom and I made up. That's the Healing Hands, and that's the Brave Explorer, and that's the Storyteller." Maxwell studied the child's constellations with genuine interest. "They're beautiful, Sophie. Did you draw these yourself?" "Aunt Eliza helped me make them accurate," Sophie admitted, "but I invented the stories." As Sophie launched into an elaborate tale about the Healing Hands constellation, a nurse who traveled the sky attending to injured stars, Maxwell became aware of whispers spreading through the gymnasium. Parents were glancing in his direction, leaning together in hushed conversation. A few were checking their phones with alarmed expressions. Eliza appeared at his side, her face tight with concern. "Maxwell, we need to step outside for a moment." In the quiet hallway outside the gymnasium, she showed him her phone. The screen displayed a breaking news alert. Thomas Harrington files for emergency custody review of Bennett children, cites unhealthy living situation and questionable influences. Maxwell felt the blood drain from his face. He's actually doing it. He's going after the girls. "Why?" Eliza asked, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and fury. Why would he do this? The children have nothing to do with the company's liability. It's not about them, Maxwell said grimly. It's about controlling the narrative. If he can, paint you as an unfit guardian. It undermines your credibility regarding Sarah's case. Classic character assassination. Eliza pressed a hand to her mouth, struggling to maintain composure. I can't lose them, Maxwell. They're all I have left of Sarah. You won't lose them, he promised, conviction hardening his voice. Thomas has overplayed his hand this time. His phone rang. Catherine Lynn. He answered immediately. I just saw the news, Catherine said without preamble. Your brother's gone too far. Agreed. But I need leverage, Catherine. Something concrete enough to force him to back down immediately. There was a brief silence on the line. There may be something. When I was reviewing Sarah's case, I found anomalies in how her records were accessed. Someone used Thomas's credentials to review her complete medical history, including psychiatric consultations she had after her husband's accident years ago. Maxwell's grip tightened on the phone. He's planning to use her grief counseling against Eliza somehow? Possibly, but here's the thing. I can prove the access was unauthorized. Hospital privacy violations carry serious penalties, both civil and criminal. Get me everything you have, Maxwell instructed. And Catherine, thank you. As he ended the call, Maxwell turned to find Eliza staring at him, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she said quietly. The girls are finally finding stability, finally processing their grief. In healthy ways. Now they'll be subjected to interviews with social workers, courtroom appearances, their mother's medical history picked apart. Maxwell stepped closer, resisting the urge to take her hands. Eliza, listen to me. Thomas is desperate. The board meeting tomorrow will likely end with his removal from the company. He's lashing out, trying to create leverage. Using children. As pawns, Eliza said bitterly. Yes, but I promise you the petition won't even make it to a hearing. Before he could elaborate, the gymnasium doors burst open and Emma emerged, her face pale with understanding beyond her years. Is it true? She asked, her voice small but steady. Are they trying to take us away from Aunt Eliza? Eliza knelt down immediately, taking Emma's hands. No one is taking you anywhere, sweetheart. Some people are just trying to cause trouble because they're afraid of the truth. Because of Mom? Emma asked perceptively. Yes, Eliza admitted, never sugarcoating reality for the girls. Because of what happened to Mom. Emma's jaw set in a stubborn line reminiscent of both her mother and her aunt. Then we need to fight back. Mom always said you should stand up to bullies. Despite everything, Maxwell felt a smile tug at his lips. The Bennett women, all 3 generations, were formidable indeed. That's exactly what we're going to do, he assured Emma. Stand up to bullies. Dawn was breaking over Boston when Maxwell's car pulled up to the Harrington Medical, headquarters for the emergency board meeting. In the lobby, security personnel looked uncomfortable as they asked for his visitor badge, a stark change from the deference he'd received just days ago as CEO. Mr. Harrington is expecting you in the conference room, the receptionist said nervously. Thomas was indeed waiting, looking surprisingly composed for a man whose professional reputation was in free fall. 3 lawyers flanked him like sentinels. Dramatic timing as always, Maxwell, Thomas commented dryly, though I'm not sure why you bothered coming. The board has already seen the documentation proving you were fully aware of the equipment flaws before Sarah Bennett's incident. Fabricated documentation, Maxwell corrected, setting his briefcase on the table. Creative but ultimately unconvincing. Thomas smirked. We'll let the board decide that, shall we? Meanwhile, it's regrettable about Ms. Bennett's custody situation. Of course, if she were to reconsider her position regarding the company's liability, perhaps the concerned citizens who filed the review could be persuaded to withdraw their petition. Those concerned citizens being your attorneys, Maxwell observed. Tell me, Thomas, when did you become this person? When did profit margins and liability concerns become more important than basic humanity? A flash of genuine emotion, perhaps hurt, perhaps anger, crossed Thomas's face before the mask of corporate calculation returned. Someone had to protect the company while you were distracted with your midlife crisis romance. Did you even bother to verify her story? Or were you too enchanted by her reserved librarian act to exercise basic due diligence? I verified everything, Maxwell said quietly, including the fact that someone using your credentials accessed Sarah Bennett's confidential medical records multiple times, including sessions related to grief counseling after her husband's accident, information you're now attempting to weaponize against her sister. Thomas's composure faltered slightly. Standard procedure for evaluating potential liability. Criminal violation of medical privacy laws, Maxwell countered, with documented proof of access that I've already provided to the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. The lawyers beside Thomas shifted uncomfortably, exchanging worried glances. You're bluffing, Thomas said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Maxwell removed a single document from his briefcase, a signed letter on the Attorney General's letterhead confirming receipt of his complaint and the opening of a formal investigation. The petition against Eliza's custody will be withdrawn today, Maxwell stated, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. The evidence against me will be publicly retracted as a misunderstanding, and you will resign from Harrington Medical, effective immediately, with a binding agreement never to discuss Sarah Bennett or her family in any public forum. Thomas laughed incredulously. Or what? You'll send your own brother to prison over a routine records check? If necessary, Maxwell confirmed calmly. But I'd prefer not to. Despite everything, you're still my brother, so I'm offering an alternative. He slid another document across the table, detailed plans for the Sarah Bennett Center for Patient Care, complete with an independent oversight committee with broad regulatory powers. Your choice, Thomas. Build something meaningful from this tragedy, or fight a battle you cannot win. For a long moment, the brothers stared at each other across the conference table, a fault line dividing the world they had built together. Finally, Thomas nodded, almost imperceptibly. I'll need assurances about my severance and stock options. You'll be treated fairly, Maxwell promised, more fairly than you've treated others. As lawyers from both sides began hammering out details, Maxwell stepped out of the conference room to make a call. It's done, he told Eliza when she answered. Thomas is withdrawing everything. The custody petition, the allegations, all of it. Her relieved exhale was audible through the phone. Thank you, Maxwell. Don't thank me, he replied honestly. This mess happened because of my company, my family, my failure to pay attention to what mattered. Perhaps, Eliza acknowledged, but you're also fixing it. That counts for something. A tentative silence stretched between them. The girls have been asking about you, she said finally. Sophie wants to know if you'll help her set up the telescope this weekend. The one you restored, Sarah's telescope. Maxwell closed his eyes briefly, overwhelmed by the simple gesture of inclusion. I'd be honored. 6 months later, hundreds of people gathered for the opening of the Sarah Bennett Center for Patient Care. The state-of-the-art facility gleamed in the summer sunshine, its entrance dominated by a striking stained glass installation depicting a constellation, the healing hands, from Sophie's science project, reimagined by a renowned artist. Inside, the main atrium featured a wall of photographs showing Sarah throughout her life, as a child alongside her twin sister, as a nursing student, as a mother beaming with her daughters. Beside the photos hung framed drawings by Emma and Sophie, illustrating the center's mission statement, where care, compassion, and safety come first. As chairperson of the Independent Oversight Committee, Eliza had spent months ensuring the center would represent everything Sarah had valued in medicine: thoroughness, transparency, and above all, genuine care for patients as whole people, not just conditions to be treated. Maxwell stood at the back of the crowd as Eliza approached the podium to deliver her remarks. She looked different now, still reserved, still thoughtful, but with a quiet confidence that commanded attention. My sister Sarah believed that healing was both a science and an art, she began, her voice clear and steady. She understood that medical technology, however advanced, is only as effective as the human compassion guiding its use. From the front row, Emma and Sophie watched their aunt with undisguised pride. Beside them sat Mrs. Martinez and other neighbors from their South End community, people who had supported the Bennett family through their darkest days. This center stands as both a memorial and a promise, Eliza continued. A memorial to a remarkable woman who spent her life caring for others, and a promise that her passing will create lasting change in how we approach patient safety and corporate accountability. Her eyes found Maxwell's across the crowded room, holding his gaze as she concluded. Sarah taught her daughters to look for new constellations, to find patterns of light in the darkness that others might miss. Today, we begin creating our own constellation of care, connecting points of innovation, compassion, and safety to guide us forward. The ceremony continued with ribbon cutting and tours, but Maxwell remained where he was, content to observe the culmination of months of difficult work. The Harrington name no longer adorned the building that had once been Boston Memorial's cardiac wing. Instead, a simple plaque acknowledged all the donors who had made the transformation possible, with no individual names elevated above others. It felt right, a recognition that healing, whether of bodies or communities or broken, trust was always a collective endeavor. As the crowd dispersed, Eliza made her way to his side. "You should have been up there with me," she said. "This wouldn't exist without you." "It wouldn't exist without Sarah," Maxwell corrected gently. "I just helped provide the resources." "And the courage to face the truth," Eliza added. "That's rarer than money in this world." They walked together toward the center's meditation garden, where Sophie and Emma were already exploring the labyrinth pathway. "Thomas sent an email yesterday," Maxwell mentioned, "from Switzerland. He's apparently doing consulting work for a European medical group." "Will he ever come back?" Eliza asked. "Eventually. Family has a way of completing its own orbit, no matter how far we stray." Maxwell paused. "Speaking of family, the girls' school called. They want to know if I'm authorized to pick them up for appointments." Eliza smiled. "I added you to the approved list last month. After the third time, Sophie demanded you be the one to help with her astronomy homework." "I'm honored," Maxwell said simply. They stopped beneath a young oak tree, watching as the girls raced each other through the labyrinth, their laughter carrying on the summer breeze. "I've been thinking," Eliza said carefully, "about what Sarah would want for all of us." "And what conclusion did you reach?" Maxwell asked, his heart quickening. "That she would want us to build something new, not just this center, not just the oversight committee, but something—" She hesitated. "Something for ourselves, too. A new constellation." Slowly, deliberately, Eliza reached for his hand, interlacing her fingers with his. The simple gesture, from a woman who had spent her life preserving fragile things with careful hands, felt like a profound act of trust. "I can't promise it will be easy," she warned. "The girls still have difficult days. I still have moments of anger about what happened to Sarah, and the foundation work is just beginning." "I don't want easy," Maxwell replied truthfully. "I want real. I want to be part of your lives, all the complexity, all the healing, all the stars you're still discovering." As if on cue, Sophie called out to them from the center of the labyrinth, "Aunt Eliza, Mr. Maxwell, come see what we found." Hand in hand, they walked toward the girls, toward whatever new pattern they might create together. A family reconstructed from loss, truth, and the courage to begin again beneath reconfigured skies. In the center of the labyrinth, Emma and Sophie had arranged small stones in the pattern of a new constellation, one with 4 stars forming a perfect square, each point connected to all the others, stronger together than apart. "We're calling it the family," Emma explained seriously, "because families can be made from scratch when you find the right people to build them with." Maxwell met Eliza's eyes over the children's heads, finding in her smile the same emotion expanding in his own chest, not the dramatic passion of fairy tales, but something steadier and more enduring. The quiet recognition of coming home after a long and difficult journey. Together they had transformed a tragedy into purpose, secrets into truth, and strangers into family, creating in the process a constellation of their own making, one that would guide them forward into whatever light awaited. Dear listeners, We hope that the story of Maxwell and Eliza has touched your hearts. Their journey of truth, healing and rebuilding reminds us that even after our darkest moments, new constellations can still be formed. If you enjoyed this tale of redemption and second chances, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. We bring you meaningful stories like this one every day, exploring the complexity and beauty of human relationships. What constellation would you create from your own life experiences? Share your thoughts in the comments below and join us tomorrow.